Hey everyone, welcome back to Anime Dreams. Today's topic is one that dives deep into the world of imagination. What if Naruko became a demigod's ally? We'll explore how this twist could reshape her journey, the alliances she might form, and the challenges that would follow. Disclaimer: the content on this channel is created purely for entertainment and discussion. I do not own any of the anime footage featured, all rights belong to their respective creators and copyright holders. Alright, let's jump right in. They did it. The battle was finally over. Together, the allied shinobi forces and a certain blonde-haired kunoichi had triumphed against the overwhelming strength of Madara Uchiha. Though the conflict had been long and difficult, their unity and determination brought peace back to the world. For Naruko Uzumaki, however, victory felt bittersweet. While the skies were now calm and the war had ended, she carried a heavy heart. She thought of Sasuke Uchiha, her closest friend and rival, and how their paths had finally reached a conclusion. The loss of Sasuke left a deep ache within her, even as peace settled over the land. In the aftermath of the battle, Naruko sat quietly at the edge of a tall cliff, gazing at the waterfall below. The rushing water reflected the whirl of emotions inside her. "Dad. What would you say to me right now?" she whispered softly. "Everyone is celebrating, but instead of joy, I feel empty. I thought being a hero meant everyone would look up to me, that everything would finally make sense. But if I can't protect everyone, then what does it mean to be a hero?" Her whiskered cheeks were damp with tears, though she quickly brushed them away. The sounds of celebration from the village had been too much for her troubled heart, which is why she had slipped away to this quiet place. Here, the steady roar of the waterfall gave her the space she needed to reflect. Lost in thought, Naruko didn't hear the footsteps behind her until a gentle hand rested on her shoulder. Startled, she turned to see her teacher's familiar eye smile. "Yo," Kakashi greeted casually as he sat down beside her. A small smile touched Naruko's face, and she shifted to give him more room. "What are you doing here, Kakashi-sensei?" she asked softly. "I could ask you the same thing, Naruko," he replied, pulling out his little orange book. For a while, they both sat in companionable silence, the only sound being the waterfall and the occasional chuckle from her teacher's reading. Finally, Naruko spoke again, her voice carrying the weight of her thoughts. "Sensei, what is the true purpose of being a shinobi?" Kakashi closed his book, knowing this question came from her heart. "A shinobi serves the village, Naruko. We follow the Hokage's guidance because we believe in protecting the people and ensuring the future of those who come after us." Naruko tilted her head thoughtfully. "So, we're just tools then?" Kakashi looked at her kindly. "Not tools. We're guardians. We choose to shoulder responsibility because we care for others. That choice is what makes us more than weapons, it makes us protectors." Naruko's expression softened as she considered his words. "I see. Thank you, Kakashi-sensei." She smiled gratefully. Her teacher returned her smile with another cheerful eye curve and patted her shoulder before standing to leave. Naruko remained seated, letting his words echo in her mind. She realized she had been dwelling too long on her sadness. The war was over, her friends were safe, and it was time to celebrate the peace they had all worked so hard to achieve. Just as she rose to her feet, however, the sky suddenly split with a radiant beam of light. Before Naruko could react, the light enveloped her completely, surrounding her in golden brilliance. Her body shimmered into sparkling fragments that rose gracefully into the heavens, as though the light was guiding her somewhere new. The valley fell quiet once more, the waterfall continuing its endless cascade, waiting for Naruko's story to continue. Entrance to Camp Half-Blood. "Mom!" A young teenager with jet black hair and bright sea-green eyes cried out, watching in despair as his mother shimmered away into golden light within the Minotaur's grasp. Falling to his knees, Percy struck the ground in frustration, his knuckles stinging though he barely noticed. His heart ached with sorrow and determination, emotions far stronger than any physical pain. "Percy, we have to go now," a familiar voice urged, pulling Percy's attention to a boy with goat legs. Yet Percy could not leave, not while the monster that had taken his mother stood before him. Without hesitation, he pulled out his pen, uncapped it, and it transformed into a shining sword under the moonlight. "Don't do it," the satyr pleaded, but Percy's resolve was unshaken. He charged forward, aiming for the Minotaur's chest with his sword, Riptide. Yet the enormous beast swatted him aside effortlessly, hurling him into a tree with a heavy thud. "Oomph!" Percy groaned, clutching his ribs in pain. The Minotaur let out a thunderous roar and charged at him again, faster than Percy could react. Fear surged through him as he desperately searched for a way to defend himself. Grover squeezed his eyes shut, terrified of failing to protect his friend. Just when it seemed the monster would reach Percy, a sudden burst of glowing blue energy crashed into the Minotaur's side, knocking it off course. Rasengan. A clear, determined voice rang out. The blue sphere spun with incredible force, pressing against the Minotaur until it dissolved into golden dust. Out of the fading light stepped a strange girl in a bright orange outfit with a red swirl on her back. Her golden hair gleamed under the moonlight, her expression equal parts weary and determined. She took a shaky step forward before glancing at Percy. "Yo," the girl greeted with a faint grin, before exhaustion overcame her and she collapsed to the ground. Percy blinked in confusion at the single word she had spoken before he too fainted, his body unable to handle the strain. Grover's jaw hung open in amazement at what he had just witnessed. Gathering his courage, he rushed to carry both Percy and the mysterious girl into the safety of the camp. A few moments ago. Naruko awoke with a throbbing headache, her body sore as she slowly opened her eyes. She realized she was lying on soft grass in the middle of a forest. Rubbing at her temples, she sat up and muttered, "Where am I?" Before she could gather her bearings, a cry of pain echoed nearby. Naruko's eyes widened. She had heard a sound like that before, a cry for help. Without hesitation, she ran toward it. At the scene, she spotted two boys in distress, one cornered by a towering bull-like creature. Without a second thought, Naruko rushed down the hill, forming her signature technique. Though fatigue weighed her down, she poured all her strength into one decisive strike. "Rasengan," she cried, driving the glowing sphere into the monster's side. With a burst of light, the creature dissolved into shimmering golden dust. Breathing heavily, Naruko dropped to one knee, managing a small, satisfied smile. She was relieved that her effort had saved someone, though her energy was nearly spent. As the two boys stared at her in astonishment, she rose unsteadily to her feet and looked at the boy by the tree. "Yo," she managed with a grin before her vision darkened and she collapsed. The last thing she saw was the boy's wide-eyed expression. The next day. Naruko opened her eyes abruptly, greeted by a tan-colored sky above a large tent. Blinking in confusion, she tried to sit up, but a gentle hand urged her to stay still. Turning her head, she saw a calm man watching her with kind eyes. "Hello, young one," the man greeted warmly. "My name is Chiron, and I am the activities director for this camp." Naruko tilted her head curiously at the man's words, but her gaze soon drifted downward, and widened in surprise. Instead of legs, the man's lower body was that of a horse. Her mouth fell open in shock. "Ah," Chiron chuckled softly. "You've noticed. As unusual as it may seem, it's not polite to stare, dear child." Naruko quickly tore her eyes away, rubbing the back of her head with a sheepish smile. "Sorry about that. Horseman. My name is Naruko Uzumaki." Chiron raised an eyebrow at the unusual name, but gave her a patient smile nonetheless. "The proper term for my kind is centaur," Chiron explained with a playful twinkle in his eye, pretending to act stern. This made Naruko quickly lift her hands in an apologetic gesture. "Ha ha ha, I'm only joking," Chiron chuckled warmly. "Though I truly am curious about you. I imagine you have many questions about where you are, correct?" Naruko nodded politely, careful not to speak too quickly for fear of appearing impolite again. "Well then," Chiron continued, "you are currently at Camp Half-Blood, specifically in the medical wing." Naruko glanced around and noticed several other patients resting in beds, which confirmed Chiron's words. Before she could ask anything, a cough brought her attention back to the centaur. "Now, do you know what makes this camp different from ordinary ones?" Chiron asked. Naruko shook her head. "This camp is unique," Chiron explained with a gentle smile, "because it is designed for demigods only." Naruko tilted her head in confusion, clearly unfamiliar with the word. "A demigod," Chiron clarified, "is a child born with one parent who is a god." Naruko's jaw nearly dropped in astonishment, her eyes wide in disbelief. "Wait, so? Everyone here is a demigod? Even you?" she asked hesitantly. Chiron smiled kindly. "Yes, indeed, everyone here is a demigod. As for me, well, I am something of a special case." He gave a small wink, which only deepened Naruko's wonder. "So let me understand this correctly," Naruko said slowly. "Gods are real? And they can have children, demigods?" Chiron nodded patiently. "How many gods are there?" Naruko asked innocently. Chiron tilted his head thoughtfully before responding. "There are many, but the ones most important for you to know are the 12 Olympians. They are the most powerful and most respected deities. For example, Zeus, the king of the gods, is ruler of the sky. His wife Hera is the goddess of marriage. Poseidon, brother to Zeus, is the god of the seas and the earth. Then there is Hades, lord of the underworld, who completes the trio of the most powerful brothers. After them, you have Ares, the god of combat, and of course, the radiant Aphrodite. He was suddenly interrupted by the arrival of a teenage girl with golden hair and striking gray eyes. Sorry to interrupt, Chiron, the girl said with an exasperated tone. The Hermes cabin has done it again. They repainted the Ares cabin neon pink during the night. Naruko couldn't help but grin at the thought of such a mischievous prank. She silently decided she would need to meet these pranksters someday. What's worse, the girl continued, tugging at her hair in frustration, the Ares cabin is furious, and Clarice is demanding a challenge against them. Chiron sighed but chuckled softly. While the Hermes cabin certainly needs to face consequences, I cannot allow reckless behavior here. I will arrange for Clarice and her cabin to wait until Friday before taking part in any form of camp contest. Naruko tilted her head in thought. A contest? What would happen on Friday? She made a mental note to ask later. The blonde girl groaned. I should have realized that sooner.
How could I, a daughter of Athena, not think of something so obvious?
Now, Annabeth, Chiron reassured her gently, patting her shoulder. You are still the most insightful young person in camp. Annabeth smiled gratefully. Thank you, Chiron. You always know the right thing to say. Chiron nodded in return. As do you. At last, Annabeth noticed Naruko, who was sitting quietly nearby. Her eyes widened as she realized this must be the newcomer she had heard about from Grover. Curiosity led her closer, until she was only inches away from Naruko's face. Naruko blinked nervously, unsure how to react under such close examination. To her surprise, Annabeth gently brushed one of the whisker-like marks on her cheek. Naruko blushed faintly at the soft touch and gave an involuntary, cat-like sound of contentment, making Annabeth narrow her eyes in curiosity before stepping back, lost in thought. I'll leave you two to get acquainted, Chiron said warmly. I must continue my duties as camp activities director. With that, he gave a polite wave and exited. Naruko turned to Annabeth, who was still studying her intently. Sensing the flood of questions about to come, Naruko quickly offered a handshake. Hi, my name is Naruko Uzumaki, she said with a friendly smile. Annabeth hesitated, then finally shook her hand. Annabeth Chase, she replied calmly. Her gray eyes scanned Naruko from head to toe before she finally asked, So, you're a demigod? Naruko nodded. Annabeth's gaze sharpened, ready with countless questions, but Naruko raised her hand quickly. How about this, we take turns. I'll ask one question, then you ask one. Fair? Annabeth thought for a moment, then nodded. Great, Naruko said, tapping her chin in thought. Earlier, you mentioned being a daughter of Athena. Who is Athena? Is she also a goddess? Annabeth crossed her arms and spoke with calm authority. Yes, my mother is a goddess. More importantly, she is one of the 12 Olympians, Athena, the goddess of wisdom and strategic warfare. Naruko tilted her head in confusion. Wait, I thought Ares was the god of war? Annabeth gave a faint sigh at Naruko's limited knowledge of Greek mythology. Ares represents chaotic battles, while Athena embodies wise and respectful strategy. That's the difference. And since you've asked 2 questions, I now have 2 for you. Naruko mumbled something under her breath about fairness, but Annabeth ignored it and continued. First question, where are you from? Word around camp is that you appeared out of a beam of light last night. With your lack of knowledge about Greek culture, I doubt you're from this world. Naruko hesitated, then steadied herself. You're right. I come from a place called the Elemental Nations. My home is the Hidden Leaf Village. Annabeth's expression shifted into thoughtful calculation before she asked her second question. That explains your unusual clothing. It's clear you're some kind of warrior. Tell me, what was your profession back home? Naruko tapped her cheek as she considered how best to explain. I was a shinobi. In my world, our villages trained ninja to serve as protectors. So, yes, I suppose you could say I was a soldier. Annabeth nodded, processing the information. She then looked at Naruko expectantly. Naruko raised an eyebrow at the silence, which made Annabeth throw her hands up in mild exasperation. It's your turn to ask me something now, Whisker. She stopped herself abruptly, her face warming with embarrassment. Naruko, however, immediately recognized the nickname. For a moment, the two sat in silence before Naruko broke into a light chuckle. Don't worry. You're not the first girl who's called me that. Annabeth glanced at her curiously but said nothing. Naruko leaned back on the bed, remembering the battle from the night before. Suddenly, she sat up. What about the others from last night? Grover and the boy, are they all right? Annabeth nodded reassuringly. Yes. Grover was actually the one who carried you here. The other boy was also exhausted, but he's resting now. Honestly, it's surprising you're awake so soon. Naruko rubbed the back of her neck. I heal faster than most people. It comes with the training. Annabeth gave her a curious look but let the subject drop. Naruko, meanwhile, thought to herself, for someone my age, she's very composed. Almost too composed. Breaking the silence, Annabeth offered. Since you're new here, I can give you a tour of the camp. She took Naruko's hand and led her outside. The moment Naruko stepped out, she gazed in awe. Camp Half-Blood stretched before her, filled with cabins, training areas, and children practicing their unique talents. Wow! This place is incredible, Naruko breathed out. Annabeth stood beside her. It is beautiful, isn't it? Naruko gave a wide grin and a thumbs up. For the first time since meeting her, Annabeth giggled softly at Naruko's cheerful energy. Come on, Annabeth said, tugging her along. I'll show you Athena's cabin first. As they walked, Naruko felt many eyes on her, but Annabeth didn't seem to notice. When they arrived, Naruko admired the design, blue and gold walls, an owl above the doorway, and children reading or playing outside. Are all these kids your siblings? Naruko asked. Yes, Annabeth replied. But since you haven't been claimed by your divine parent yet, you'll stay in Hermes' cabin. Every demigod must be acknowledged by their parent god before moving into their respective cabin. And if no one claims them? Naruko asked quietly. Annabeth's expression softened. Then they remain in Hermes' cabin indefinitely. It happens more often than you'd think. Naruko frowned slightly but kept her thoughts to herself. As they passed other cabins, Naruko pointed to a pair that seemed unoccupied. What about those two? Those belong to Zeus and Poseidon, Annabeth explained. The three eldest gods swore an oath never to have more children. They swore on the river Styx, which is the strongest oath there is. Naruko thought this sounded unfair, but before she could speak, Annabeth redirected her toward Hermes' cabin. The building was older and crowded, yet lively. Before they could step inside, a loud voice rang out. Who painted my cabin this time? Curious, Naruko peeked around the corner and saw a tall girl with sharp eyes holding a younger camper by the collar of his shirt. She seemed fiery, much like someone Naruko once knew back home. Spotting Naruko and Annabeth, the girl dropped the boy and walked over. So you're the new arrival, the girl said with interest. Word is you stood up to the Minotaur. Not bad for a first day. Annabeth arched an eyebrow. Clarice, maybe you should spend less time boasting and more time training. Clarice smirked. Don't start, Annabeth. My father Ares is stronger than. Annabeth cut her off smoothly. My mother Athena has bested your father more than once. Clarice scowled, gripping her spear. Sparks flickered faintly at its tip. Naruko immediately stepped between them, raising her hands. Hey, let's not turn this into a fight. We're all on the same side, aren't we? Clarice narrowed her eyes but eventually stepped back. Humph. Fine. Anyway, we've got Capture the Flag this Friday. I'll be waiting to see what you can do, newcomer. She winked at Naruko before stomping off toward her own cabin. Annabeth sighed. She never changes. Naruko smiled gently. You'll be okay, wise girl? Annabeth turned pink at the nickname. Wise girl? I didn't give you permission to call me that. Well, you called me Whiskers, Naruko reminded her. Annabeth glanced away, muttering softly. Idiot. Naruko chuckled warmly and waved as Annabeth returned to her cabin. With that, Naruko stepped into Hermes' cabin, ready to face whatever adventures awaited her in this new world. To say the cabin was crowded would have been an understatement. There was hardly enough room to stand, let alone lie down to rest. Sighing softly, Naruko stepped outside and decided to search for a quieter place to sleep. It seemed only reasonable that she was not permitted to enter any of the other cabins, so she wandered toward the far edge of the camp. At last, she discovered a peaceful spot beneath a tall pine tree. For some reason she couldn't quite explain, the tree radiated a calm and comforting aura. With a small shrug, Naruko settled herself at its base, and before long, she drifted into a gentle and restful sleep. Far away, a solitary figure leaned against a railing, gazing at the glowing city lights in deep contemplation. His long, dark gray hair framed a stern face, and a well-kept gray and black beard gave him a distinguished appearance. He wore a sharp, dark blue pinstriped suit, which only amplified his commanding presence. The sparkling skyline was filled with noise, blaring horns, voices echoing through the streets, and the constant drone of helicopters and other flying machines. Though he admired the brilliance of the city lights, the chaos of modern inventions irritated him. As the god of the sky, he had sworn never to rely on such contraptions, and unlike others, his vows carried great weight. After standing for nearly an hour, he finally sat on a nearby bench, stroking his beard with growing impatience. Where is he? The god thought. His brother was meant to arrive long ago, though deep down, he had already expected such tardiness. At last, the sound of footsteps drew his attention. Emerging from the elevator was a man with sea-green eyes, suntan skin, and short black hair touched with gray. His relaxed appearance contrasted sharply with the other god. He wore a bright Hawaiian shirt patterned with coconuts and parrots, khaki shorts, worn leather sandals, and a fishing cap decorated with lures. Despite the casual attire, he carried an aura of immense authority. The god in the suit let out a short sigh. Always making an entrance, he muttered, tapping the empty space on the bench. The newcomer grinned broadly as he sat down. Well now, brother, it has been quite a while. The first god folded his arms. Enough pleasantries, Poseidon. You know why I summoned you here. Poseidon tilted his head playfully, though his sharp eyes suggested otherwise. Perhaps you need me to cover for you again? Just like the last 100 times? He teased. The stern god's expression darkened, a faint flush rising to his face. This is no laughing matter, Poseidon. You know the seriousness of what has happened. Seeing his brother's tone shift, Poseidon straightened slightly. Then speak. Why have you called me, Zeus? Zeus's gaze hardened. Something has been stolen from me, an item that represents both my power and my very identity. My master bolt is missing. Poseidon's usual calm vanished in an instant. He shot to his feet, staring at Zeus in disbelief. Your master bolt? That's impossible. How could anyone take such a thing? But Zeus's narrowed eyes lingered on him. You don't mean to suggest I had a hand in this, Poseidon said sharply. You know very well that no god can steal another's symbol of power. And even if such a thing were possible, I would never resort to such dishonor. Zeus's voice was steady, yet filled with weight. Perhaps. But there are other ways such theft can occur, ways that do not break divine law. Poseidon's eyes widened. Are you accusing one of my children? His voice carried both shock and anger. I have barely spoken to them because of the rules we all agreed upon. And yet you cast blame so freely? Whether you like it or not, Zeus replied, his presence towering with authority, your child may very well be capable of this act. And so, I give you fair warning, you have until the summer solstice to see that my master bolt is returned to Olympus. Either by you, or by your child. If not, the consequences will be most severe. Without another word, Zeus turned and strode back to the elevator, vanishing from sight. Poseidon remained where he stood, his heart weighed with worry. He clenched his hands tightly before whispering into the night, Percy, my child. I never wished this burden upon you. Yet fate has chosen otherwise. Be strong, for the days ahead will test you in ways I could not shield you from. Should you succeed, I vow to reveal the truth that has been hidden from you. With that, Poseidon dissolved into a gentle swirl of water, leaving only the faint outline of a splash where he had stood. Camp Half-Blood. The faint fragrance of olive oil lingered in the air as Naruko's eyelids slowly fluttered open. Still half drowsy, she found herself staring directly into a pair of steel-gray eyes. To her surprise, it was the same girl she had met the day before, quietly watching her while she slept. Ah, Naruko exclaimed, springing upright against the pine tree and suddenly wide awake. You know, you talk in your sleep. Did you realize that? The girl asked casually. What, why were you watching me sleep, wise girl? Naruko blurted out, startled. The unexpected volume of her voice made the other girl wince before she rolled her eyes. Calm down, sleeping beauty. I only watched for a minute, the girl replied. Chiron asked me to explain more about Greek mythology to you. Still adjusting from waking up so suddenly, Naruko frowned. Did I say anything strange in my sleep? She asked seriously. The girl quickly muttered a no, though Naruko noticed something was off. She's definitely hiding something, Naruko thought, though she decided not to press further. The girl continued, Chiron had already started teaching you about the 12 Olympians before I interrupted. Do you remember where you left off? Naruko scratched her chin. We covered the 3 major gods. Then Ares, the god of war. Oh right. We left off at someone named Afro. Something? You mean Aphrodite, the goddess of love and joy, the girl corrected in a dry tone. Since I already mentioned my mother, Athena, let's move on. There's Demeter, goddess of agriculture, who is the reason we have seasons. Her story with her daughter Persephone is one for another time. Naruko only shrugged. The less she had to memorize, the better. She had already forgotten a few of the other names. Next is Apollo, god of light. He drives the sun across the sky with his chariot, bringing us daytime. Hermes, the messenger of the gods, also protects unclaimed demigods and gives them a place to stay. Artemis is the goddess of the hunt, though, fair warning, she's famous for her dislike of men, the girl said pointedly. Hephaestus, god of fire and the forge, creates weapons and tools for heroes and gods. And finally, Dionysus, god of wine, who also happens to be our camp director. He can be a bit difficult, but he's always around. Naruko nodded to show she was following along, though she was already wondering how much of this she'd actually remember. So, is that all? The girl nodded. Naruko gave a playful salute. All right, then I'll get going. And with that, she disappeared in a puff of smoke. Annabeth coughed and waved the air clear, shocked to find Naruko completely gone. Blinking, she searched around the pine tree, but there was no trace of her. Just as she turned back toward camp, she caught a glimpse of orange darting past the corner of her vision. Determined, Annabeth raced after it. Meanwhile, Naruko sprinted through camp. She didn't want to seem rude to Annabeth, so she had left a clone behind to keep her company. Unfortunately, it dispersed too soon, sending all its memories back to her. With a sigh, Naruko slowed down to take in her new surroundings. The camp looked more like a training ground than a typical camp. Cabins were scattered around, and practice arenas stood nearby. Just then, a commotion drew her attention. A crowd had gathered, watching something at one of the cabins. Curious, Naruko moved closer. She spotted Percy, drenched from head to toe along with several others. The crowd glared at him, and Percy scratched his head nervously. I don't suppose a simple apology will fix this, huh? Percy muttered. Clarice, glaring at him with clenched fists, shouted, new campers are supposed to get this treatment, not me. Naruko raised an eyebrow. Interesting. Why wasn't I pranked then, warrior girl? She asked, stepping beside Percy. Clarice scowled. Because you're different. You actually showed strength, unlike him. Naruko crossed her arms. Strength isn't just about fighting. Loyalty, bravery, and determination matter too. Percy looked confused when Naruko gave him a light tap on the shoulder. What was that for? He asked. You always seem to get caught in trouble whenever I see you, Naruko replied with mild exasperation. Clarice pointed her spear at Percy. Step aside, Naruko. My quarrel is with him. Naruko shrugged and stepped back, making Percy pale. Wait, you're leaving me here? He whispered. Naruko smirked. If you start a challenge, you finish it. That's how you grow stronger. Before Percy could respond, both he and Clarice drew their weapons, ready to fight. But Annabeth's voice cut through the tension. Enough. You know Chiron said no dueling until Friday, she scolded, panting from her sprint. Clarice frowned but hesitated, clearly remembering the consequences of breaking that rule before. With a huff, she stormed off, her friends following. Percy let out a heavy sigh of relief, collapsing onto the ground. I thought I was finished. Naruko, however, had tried sneaking away during the commotion, only to be stopped by Annabeth. She tapped her foot impatiently. And where do you think you're going, Naruko? You owe me an explanation, she said, narrowing her eyes at the blonde shinobi. Well, what you experienced was one of my abilities, I suppose, Naruko finally explained. Yet, from the look Annabeth was still giving her, Naruko knew she wasn't satisfied with such a vague answer. All right then, I guess it wouldn't hurt too much if I told you a little more. The ability lets me create a clone of myself. The clone can do almost everything I can, though not quite at the same level. It disappears easily if struck, or if I choose to dismiss it. Annabeth placed a thoughtful finger on her chin, her other hand making little circles in the air as she thought. Speaking of abilities, what exactly was that you did to Clarice? Naruko asked, glancing at Percy, who was still lying on the ground. Shrugging, Percy replied, I honestly don't know. One moment I was being pulled into the girls' bathroom, and the next, the water suddenly burst out, sweeping Clarice and her group away. What's strange is, I didn't even get wet. His brow furrowed as he tried to understand it himself. Wait, Percy, you actually controlled the water? Annabeth asked in surprise, stepping closer to join the conversation. Percy blinked at her sudden presence, cheeks turning pink for a moment, but quickly answered, I guess so. It was such a strange feeling, now that I think back on it. Naruko noticed Annabeth wearing that same pensive look she had earlier, when Naruko had asked if Annabeth had heard anything unusual while she was asleep. I see, Annabeth murmured, almost to herself. Percy, however, turned his attention back to Naruko. Setting aside what just happened, I really need to thank you. If it wasn't for you, Grover and I would have been in serious trouble. He extended his hand. Naruko accepted it without hesitation. The name's Percy Jackson. Nice to meet you, I'm Naruko Uzumaki. And don't worry about earlier, it's no big deal. Where I come from, helping people out is something I do all the time. Percy noticed the brief shadow on her face, but chose not to pry. Instead, he shifted the topic. So from what I've learned, every camper here is a demigod, a child of either a god or a goddess. Naruko nodded, listening carefully. That means you and I are the same, Percy continued. Do you know which deity is your parent? Naruko hesitated, frowning slightly. She knew who her parents were. But neither had ever seemed like a god or goddess to her. Shaking her head, she answered honestly. Percy sighed with the same disappointment. I guess you don't know yours either? Naruko asked gently. Percy nodded. Well, Naruko added thoughtfully, judging from how you commanded the water. I'd say your parent might be Po. Before she could finish, Annabeth quickly covered Naruko's mouth with her hand, eyes wide. Naruko blinked at her, confused, while Annabeth whispered an apologetic sorry. Percy tilted his head, not understanding. Naruko was just going to say that your parent could be one of the Olympians, Annabeth cut in quickly. Satisfied enough with that explanation, Percy didn't press further. Annabeth let out a quiet sigh of relief, then tugged Naruko to the side for a private word. Don't you remember what I told you earlier? Annabeth whispered urgently. The three great gods swore never to have children again. If what you almost revealed is true, then that promise has already been broken more than once. Naruko's eyes widened. Wait. There's another child? Annabeth realized her slip and groaned softly. Do you swear on the river Styx not to tell anyone what I'm about to reveal? She asked firmly. Seeing how serious she was, Naruko nodded. Annabeth pressed, say it aloud. Sighing, Naruko repeated obediently, I, Naruko, swear on the river Styx not to tell anyone what you're about to reveal. A low rumble of thunder echoed faintly, though the skies were clear. Naruko tilted her head, curious, while Annabeth finally continued. Her name was Talia Grace. She was the daughter of Zeus. But keeping her heritage a secret was nearly impossible, and soon she was in danger. To protect her, she came to Camp Half-Blood. Unfortunately, she was pursued by monsters. Just before reaching safety, she made the ultimate choice. She gave up her own freedom so that her friends Luke, Grover, and I could escape. Out of compassion, Zeus transformed her into the pine tree you slept beneath last night. That tree now shields our camp with a magical barrier that protects us all. Annabeth's voice grew softer, her gaze fixed on the tree. No wonder I felt safe there, Naruko said quietly. She noticed Annabeth's eyes misting, so she stepped forward and wrapped her in a gentle hug. It's all right. I know what it feels like to lose someone precious. You're not alone, wise girl. Annabeth blushed at the unexpected embrace, but she didn't pull away. For a moment, she allowed herself to relax in Naruko's warmth. A small giggle escaped her when she realized Naruko smelled faintly of ramen. They remained like that until Percy cleared his throat from a short distance away. Both girls stepped back quickly, their cheeks tinged pink. Thank you, Annabeth whispered softly, still red-faced. Naruko rubbed the back of her head awkwardly. Don't mention it. Before the silence grew too heavy, Percy spoke up. So, what happens now? Annabeth sighed, suddenly remembering something important. I forgot to tell you both, tomorrow is Friday. Percy paled at the thought, while Naruko's eyes sparkled. Yes. Tomorrow's going to be amazing. Naruko cheered. Or completely stressful. Percy muttered under his breath, dreading the thought of facing Clarice again. Annabeth smiled. Well, it's decided then. I want both of you on my team. Luke will be thrilled. Luke? Naruko asked curiously. Luke Castellan, Annabeth explained. He's the son of Hermes and head counselor of his cabin. You'll like him, he's a good person. Both Naruko and Percy nodded in understanding. Now, Annabeth added, it's time you met Mr. D. Naruko already recognized the nickname, while Percy looked puzzled. Dionysus, Annabeth clarified. Percy still didn't look much wiser, but at least now he knew a name. With that, Annabeth led them toward one of the larger buildings in camp. She opened the door with a small motion, gesturing for them to step inside. When they entered the room, they quickly noticed two men engaged in what looked like a heated debate. The man on the left, with horse legs, was easily recognized as Chiron. By process of elimination, the man on the right had to be Dionysus. This guy is a god? Naruko and Percy both whispered in unison. The questioned man raised an eyebrow at their doubtful expressions. What, have you two ever seen a god before? Mr. D asked with a hint of irritation. Both shook their heads, and the god of wine continued, then stay quiet, you inexperienced demigods. Now, Chiron interjected gently, I believe it would be courteous for you to properly introduce yourself, my friend. Dionysus rolled his eyes before snapping his fingers. In an instant, vines sprouted from the ground and wrapped around the two teens, holding them in place. I am Dionysus, god of wine, merriment, and many other things you may not comprehend. At present, I am also the camp director and your superior. He gave them a stern look as the vines kept them still. Then, with a flick of his wrist, he turned their heads toward him. Listen closely. You will show respect. Even if people call you heroes, you are still just young students finding your way. What do you even have against heroes anyway? Naruko asked, her curiosity sparking despite the restraints. Dionysus narrowed his eyes before stepping closer, a faint glow shimmering in his gaze. Heroes never change. You accuse us gods of pride, yet many of you carry that same pride. You take what you want, forget gratitude, and often leave others behind. Forgive me if I show little fondness for such behavior. With that, he released them from the vines. Percy and Naruko rubbed their wrists and stepped back cautiously. What were your names again? Mr. D muttered, pretending to think. Ah yes, Perseus and Naru. It's Naruko. And Percy. Both teens corrected loudly. Close enough, Mr. D replied dismissively as he sat back down. Now then, what is it you want? Both looked at Annabeth, who grew nervous under his gaze.
Mr. D, I was wondering if you could explain how you knew Naruko wasn't from our world.
This revelation startled Naruko, who looked at him with wide eyes. Rubbing his chin, Dionysus finally answered, That's simple, Annabeth. I'm a god, he said it as though it were the most obvious thing in the world. Everyone groaned at his unhelpful answer. Fine. I'll tell you a little more, Mr. D relented, looking directly at Naruko. I know you're not from this world because I know your parent. They told me about you. Naruko froze, shocked by his words. Why would my parent ever speak to you? She asked, disbelief written on her face. Humph, your parent once said nearly the same thing to me, Dionysus muttered while sipping from his goblet. Naruko's eyes widened further. My parent was no god, she whispered, uncertain and shaken. Ever hear of shape-shifting? Dionysus explained. Gods can disguise themselves, just as ninjas use transformations. Have you ever wondered why those techniques came so naturally to you? Naruko fell silent, stunned by the revelation. Yes, Dionysus continued, we gods are aware of your world's abilities. And I know about the great challenges you've faced. It takes courage to overcome trials like yours. He gave her a small nod of recognition. Everyone stared at Naruko with sympathy as she trembled slightly, overwhelmed by the information. Percy and Annabeth each placed a hand on her shoulders, steadying her. Calm down, Naruko, Annabeth said gently. He's not your enemy. Percy nodded in agreement. Naruko took a deep breath and slowly relaxed, though her eyes still held determination. She looked back at Dionysus. Then tell me. Who was my parent? She asked softly. Dionysus grew serious. Naruko, only your true parent can reveal that to you. It is not my place. The same goes for you, Percy. Naruko, though unsatisfied, understood. She nodded curtly and turned to join her friends. Together, they left the room. Chiron sighed quietly as he watched them go. Do you think we should have told her? Dionysus swirled his goblet thoughtfully before replying, and risk her being upset with us forever? No, better to let her parent reveal the truth. Besides, some knowledge is meant to come in its own time. With that, he leaned back, already shifting his attention to tomorrow's camp games. The walk back to camp felt unusually long for both Naruko and Percy. Annabeth, meanwhile, was lost in thought, still piecing together the events of the day. Sasuke connected to Ares? That's strange. Naruko kept wondering as she trudged along. Percy's mind was elsewhere too, thinking about his father and the mystery surrounding him. He couldn't help but feel frustrated, wishing his dad had done more for his family. By the time they arrived at Annabeth's cabin, night had already fallen. Well, today certainly was something, Annabeth remarked, breaking the silence. Percy gave a short nod, while Naruko met her gaze directly. Yeah, it'd be a lie to say otherwise, Naruko replied with a little laugh, trying to lift the mood. Percy, ever oblivious to the heavy atmosphere, muttered, honestly, today was just rough. Both Annabeth and Naruko sent him a sharp look, and Percy quickly decided it was best to stay quiet. Naruko, if I recall, you slept outside last night, Annabeth pointed out. Naruko shrugged as if to say, so what? Annabeth sighed. Wouldn't you be more comfortable in, oh I don't know, an actual tent? She asked, her voice laced with sarcasm. I mean, sure. But I don't exactly own a tent, Naruko admitted, scratching the back of her head. In the name of Zeus, you two can be so dense, Annabeth exclaimed, throwing her hands up. She darted inside her cabin and returned with a small box. Here. It's a tent. Since I already have a cabin, this will be more useful to you too. She handed it to Percy. Thank you, Annabeth. You're honestly the kindest person here, Naruko beamed. Her words made Annabeth blush faintly. She wasn't used to compliments, and it flustered her more than she expected. Really, it's nothing. Just the right thing to do, Annabeth corrected softly, thankful for the cover of night hiding her expression. Whatever you say. We'll see you tomorrow, and together we'll give Ares' cabin a proper challenge, Naruko declared enthusiastically as she headed toward Talia's tree. Please don't remind me, Percy groaned, dragging his feet behind her. Naruko chuckled at his dramatic tone, her laughter easing some of the day's tension. By the time they reached the pine tree, they had managed to set up the tent. To their surprise, it was large enough for both of them to sleep comfortably. The extra space came in handy, since both tended to move around in their sleep, and sometimes even muttered dream words without realizing it. Before long, they had drifted off peacefully. Later that night, Naruko woke suddenly, sensing something unusual in the air. The forest seemed quieter than before, and the faint rustle of leaves unsettled her. She leaned over to wake Percy, but it proved harder than expected. Percy, it turned out, was a restless sleeper, his legs kicked with surprising force, almost like an athlete practicing in his dreams. Naruko even had to use 2 shadow clones just to hold him steady. Seriously, Percy? You're this restless even in your sleep? She muttered, narrowly avoiding another swing of his foot. Finally, she gave his shoulder a firm shake. Percy, wake up, it's important. He mumbled groggily, eyes barely open. What is it, Naruko? Not wanting to risk him drifting off again, she shook him a little more until he sat upright. Look at the sky, Naruko said, her voice unusually serious. What do you think when you see the stars? Percy squinted at her, then reluctantly tilted his gaze upward. If I answer, will you promise to let me go back to sleep? Naruko nodded. Percy studied the night sky for a moment. Well, I see countless stars, maybe even worlds out there with their own stories. They all shine with the same brightness because they're unimaginably far away. Naruko sighed and covered her face with her palm at his scientific explanation. All right then, genius, Percy said with a teasing tone. What do you think about the stars? You silly goose, Percy, someone has taken our tent. Naruko finally exclaimed. That was when Percy realized why he felt a gentle breeze all of a sudden. Looking quickly around, he concluded that their tent was indeed missing. Whoever took our tent is going to regret it, Naruko declared with determination, before pacing back and forth, clearly deep in thought. Percy sighed, assuming she was already planning a playful prank to get back at the tricksters. But then, a strange rustling noise came from behind him. Feeling a tap on his shoulder, Naruko turned, about to speak, until she saw Percy pointing silently. Following his gaze, she noticed something that explained Percy's alarm. Their tent was dangling from the trees, ripped apart, with a large piece hanging on a trunk like a flag. The flag had a red drawing of a boar-shaped helm. Narrowing her eyes, Naruko started marching back to camp with steady determination. Percy followed, a little worried about what Naruko might be plotting next. I really don't like these games. Percy muttered. The next day, Clarice woke up with a wide grin. Her digital clock read 7 a.m., and the word Friday was flashing brightly. Excited for the big event later that day, she leapt out of bed. Since she usually woke earlier than her cabin mates, she had plenty of time to get ready. After preparing for about 30 minutes, she looked out the window, only to freeze at the sight of a massive serpent slithering through camp. Grabbing her spear and shield, she bolted out the door. What she didn't notice was the neat pile of marbles scattered across her doorstep. In her rush, she stepped right onto them, sliding uncontrollably across the ground before landing, splash, in a huge puddle of mud. To top it off, she let out an uncharacteristically high-pitched squeal the entire way. When she climbed out, dripping and muddy, the entire camp was gathered outside laughing. Even Mr. D and Chiron were present. What caught her attention most, though, was the fact that Mr. D had a video camera in hand. "Marvelous. Could you turn around so I can capture the mud on your back, dear?" He chuckled. Clarice, now both embarrassed and annoyed, knew instantly who the culprit was. Naruko. She had been on the receiving end of Clarice's prank earlier, and this was clearly payback. Clarice sighed to herself, deciding she should probably avoid challenging Naruko again in prank wars. Meanwhile, Naruko and Percy laughed quietly from the back of the crowd, enjoying the reactions. They didn't notice two smiling figures approaching. "Naruko, you do realize Clarice might chase Percy around after this, right?" Annabeth said with a small laugh. Despite her words, she was clearly amused by the prank. "Well done, Naruko. As head counselor of Hermes' cabin, I salute your skill," said Luke with a respectful bow. "Luke, isn't it? Thank you, but a bow seems a little too much," Naruko replied with a small smile. "Not at all. Anyone clever enough to prank Clarice like that deserves such respect," Luke answered warmly. He turned to Percy and gave a friendly wave. "You must be Percy. An honor to meet you." Percy returned a polite nod, while Naruko simply thought to herself that Luke's enthusiasm was perhaps too much. "A splendid show indeed, young campers," Mr. D interrupted in a dramatic British accent. "Why are you speaking like that?" Annabeth asked curiously. "Annabelle, you truly are no fun at parties," Mr. D teased, earning an eye roll from her. "All right, everyone, gather in the forest. It's time for our weekly game of Capture the Flag," Chiron announced. Cheers erupted as campers hurried toward the trees. Luke and Annabeth followed, while Naruko noticed Percy still looking uneasy. She placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "Percy, stay close to me. I promise, nothing bad will happen to you," Naruko said gently. Just then, thunder rumbled softly overhead, sealing her vow. Naruko smiled faintly. I could get used to that, she thought before leading Percy into the forest. When they finally arrived at the designated area, Chiron gathered everyone into a circle. "The rules are the same as always," he announced warmly. "The creek marks the boundary, the forest is fair ground, all magical items are permitted, and the flags must be clearly displayed with no more than 2 guards each. Players may be tagged and disarmed, but they cannot be tied up or gagged. No rough conduct is allowed, and anyone who breaks the rules will forfeit dessert for an entire week. Guards may not stand closer than 10 yards from their flag." Everyone nodded in agreement. The game was moments from beginning when Annabeth suddenly raised her hand. "Wait. Percy, Naruko, do either of you have armor?" she asked. Percy opened his mouth to say no, but then stopped when he noticed Naruko calmly rolling up her sleeves and pant legs, revealing markings inked onto her skin. With graceful precision, she pressed her hands against the seals and infused them with chakra. A quiet flash appeared, and a pair of polished forearm protectors materialized, followed by leg guards. Annabeth's eyes widened, but she remained silent, watching intently. When Naruko was nearly finished, Annabeth finally spoke. Naruko. I think you're missing something," she said, gesturing to her chest. Naruko blinked, then laughed lightly. "Right, thank you, wise girl." Without hesitation, Naruko tugged her shirt slightly upward, revealing a sealing mark across her torso. A ripple of chakra later, a sleek black flak jacket appeared around her, followed by a long, elegant sword in its sheath. She secured it across her back with practiced ease. In her right hand, she now held a porcelain fox mask, its stylized design immediately capturing the crowd's attention. The campers collectively gasped in awe. The mask was beautifully crafted yet imposing, and together with her armor, Naruko looked like a seasoned warrior from legend. "Naruko? What kind of armor is that?" Annabeth asked, her voice filled with astonishment. Naruko adjusted her gloves and smiled brightly. "This is my Anbu armor, it's reserved for elite missions." Before anyone could reply, Clarice arrived. Cleaned up and fully armored herself, She stopped short when she saw Naruko. Her jaw dropped. "In the name of Ares, you are absolutely incredible," Clarice exclaimed, rushing forward. She looked Naruko up and down with admiration. "I've never seen anything like it. You're full of surprises, warrior girl." Chiron nodded in approval before turning to Percy. "Excellent armor, Naruko. Now Percy, do you perhaps have any of your own?" All eyes turned toward Percy. He shifted uncomfortably and admitted quietly, "No." The campers groaned in disappointment, though Chiron spoke kindly. "Does anyone have an extra set Percy may borrow?" "I do," came a voice from the back. The crowd parted as Luke stepped forward, carrying a leather chest plate and bronze helmet. "They may be a little loose, but they'll work until we have something fitted for you," he said apologetically. Percy gratefully accepted the equipment. With everything prepared, Chiron raised his voice, "Teams, take your positions. Begin at my command." The campers scattered to their bases, filled with excitement. "Percy, Naruko, stick with me. I'll guide us toward the flag," Luke instructed. They nodded in unison. "What about Annabeth?" Percy asked with concern. "Don't worry," Luke reassured him. "This entire strategy was her design. She's the daughter of Athena, after all." Chiron's powerful voice echoed through the forest. "By my authority, the game begins." "Let's move," Luke shouted, sprinting forward. Naruko and Percy quickly followed. It wasn't long before they encountered opposition, the children of Ares. "There are 3 of them," Luke assessed quickly. "I'll hold them off. You 2 head for the flag. Clarice will almost certainly be waiting there with reinforcements." Trusting Luke's skill, Naruko and Percy nodded to each other before darting into the forest, focused and determined to capture the flag. When they finally reached a clearing, a gentle creek sparkled under the sunlight, winding peacefully through the field. Both Percy and Naruko, parched from their journey, rushed forward eagerly. They knelt at the water's edge and drank deeply, savoring the crisp, refreshing taste. The calm moment was soon interrupted when a sudden twig snapped nearby. Instinctively, Naruko pulled Percy aside just as a heavy club crashed down where he had been moments earlier. Standing tall before them was a large, imposing teenager whose presence strongly resembled the other Ares cabin demigods they had met. Naruko frowned slightly. "Why is it that every Ares camper we meet seems to rely more on strength than reason?" she said with a hint of playful challenge. The boy's eyes narrowed, clearly displeased by her remark. "Mock me if you want," he replied sharply. "At least I know who my father is." Naruko's gaze grew more serious, though her tone remained calm. "If that's the only thing you can boast about, then perhaps you have more to prove than I thought." She unsheathed her katana, its polished steel gleaming with a faint blue aura. The boy chuckled, unconvinced. "That little blade doesn't frighten me. No ordinary weapon can harm me." Naruko simply smiled, her confidence unwavering. "Then perhaps you should see what makes this blade different." Before he could continue, Naruko's swift movement forced him to stumble backward, dazed by her speed. Though strong, he quickly realized that sheer force was no match for refined skill. The clash ended with him collapsing safely to the side, unconscious but unharmed beyond his pride. Naruko exhaled softly, lowering her sword. "Perhaps this will remind you that strength must be guided by wisdom," she murmured, her katana still glowing faintly before settling back into its sheath. Turning her attention back to the creek, she noticed Percy locked in a duel with Clarice. His efforts were admirable, but Clarice's experience was beginning to overwhelm him. With each strike of her spear, Percy was pushed closer to the ground until, with a thud, he landed on his back. "Get up, if you can," Clarice challenged, striking her shield with determination. Percy groaned, gazing up at the sky. Then, a gentle voice stirred in his mind, urging him toward the water. At first, he resisted. But soon, weary and desperate, he dragged himself into the creek. The moment his body touched the stream, strength surged through him. He rose with renewed vigor, surprising everyone gathered. Naruko's eyes lit up. "I knew it. Looks like I was right, Annabeth," she called with a mischievous grin. Annabeth sighed, shaking her head at Naruko's playful nature, though she couldn't hide her intrigue. With renewed energy, Percy clashed with Clarice again. This time, he was faster, every strike flowing like water, every movement empowered by the creek itself. Clarice, skilled though she was, couldn't land a blow. Eventually, Percy found an opening, and Clarice stumbled, unable to continue. The clearing fell silent until Naruko began clapping cheerfully. One by one, others joined in until the whole team was applauding Percy's victory. Smiling, Percy retrieved the enemy's flag and carried it triumphantly across the boundary. His teammates cheered, surrounding him with excitement. Yet Annabeth remained thoughtful. "Percy," she said, "step back into the creek." He hesitated, then obeyed. Again, the water seemed to revitalize him instantly. Everyone looked on in awe, especially when Naruko also touched the water, her hands cupping it gently. A similar glow spread around her, leaving Annabeth and Chiron wide-eyed. "This water," Naruko whispered, amazed. "It feels alive." Before Percy could respond, a soft green light shimmered above his head, forming the unmistakable shape of a trident. The onlookers gasped. You are the son of Poseidon, Percy," Naruko said with quiet awe. But as the crowd's gaze shifted, another glow appeared above Naruko. A second trident shimmered brilliantly, confirming what none had expected. Annabeth's breath caught in her throat. Chiron bowed deeply. The rest of the camp followed. "Poseidon, Earth Shaker, Stormbringer, Father of Horses," Chiron intoned solemnly. "Hail, Perseus Jackson, son of the Sea God. Hail, Naruko Uzumaki, daughter of the Sea God." The clearing echoed with the voices of the campers as they repeated the declaration, recognizing the two newly revealed children of Poseidon. Dear YouTube family, this is all for now. If you enjoyed the content, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. It really helps the channel grow and keeps me motivated to bring you more. Thank you for your support. Regards. Anime Dreams.